I didn't really realize at the time, like, the insanity that was going to kind of take place.
It was like being cold, having the chills, but it wasn't, you weren't cold. You were just sitting there going, oh my God, what is this, you know?
I'm just thinking he just died.
I remember one of the first things, I look up and his face is like right there. I knew you were gonna crash. I told you you were gonna crash.
Did you practice on the hill first?
No. No, I would have been dead earlier.
The DNA of human beings tells us how to live our lives. Have fun, enjoy friends and family, and most importantly, in what psychologists would describe as self-preservation, don't take part in hazardous activity that can result in serious injury or death. Yet starting on October 17, 1975 in Signal Hill, California, skateboarders simply ignored any concern for physical well-being, launching themselves over a steep drop of a section of roughly paved asphalt, appropriately named Hill Street. The reason? The world's first skateboard race, the Signal Hill Speed Run. The creation of the steep drop at Signal Hill started long before the skateboard race.
This whole story started between 2 and 5 million years ago. Okay, and it's been building ever since.
That's a long, long time ago. So impressive is the hill, it resulted in the name Signal Hill, possibly because Native Americans used the top for sending smoke signals.
It was June of 1922, or so they hit oil big, and it wasn't very long before we had 1,000 oil wells in Signal Hill.
Ironically, the first sanctioned race went up, not down Hill Street. The Model T hill climb featured antique Fords huffing up the incline. Not all made it. Like the unforgettable location at Signal Hill, the dynamic founder of the race, Jim O'Mahony, was P.T. Barnum of skateboarding.
He had the toys. I don't know where he got the wherewithal to have all the toys, but he had all the toys.
In some way, he's like a collector of history and a collector of energy, you know what I mean? And I don't mean that like he's a vampire.
The charismatic collector also had an unusual obsession, death-defying feats.
It was the early 70s, hang gliders came out, and it looked really cool. We got together and said, let's just start a magazine.
O'Mahony's reputation grew, as did the staff of his magazine. Among the most memorable, the fearless beauty, Tina Trevethan, world champion hang glider, the publication's art director, and breaker of many a heart.
She was gorgeous. I mean, if you took a look at her, wow, you know?
God, she sure was a dove too, man. She was a really pretty girl.
The problem? The gang's favorite hang gliding spot, Point Furman in San Pedro, was also the world's most dangerous.
Point Furman was a sheer cliff. I don't know if it's 150 feet, but it's a good suicide spot if you get bored with life.
And after about a year, I'd broken my legs twice. I watched about 10 of my friends die, and I go, you know, this is just too tough. So I hung it up and got back to safer sports, you know, like skateboarding.
This new sport emerged from what had for years been a mere kid's toy: skateboarding. And it was no longer a fad. It was a California-born lifestyle.
You know, we all just jumped from one sport to the next. In 74, we started the USSA. 75, we started Skateboard magazine because we had the crew. They started calling us up. ABC, that was our first TV show. Here you have David Frost and the Guinness Book of World Records. It was a big show. And they recognized skateboarding as a valid sport. And what can you give us? I go, well, I'll give you a speed run right off the bat because that's a natural. You know, anything with 4 wheels, you're going to go for speed for a world record. And Signal Hill, I mean, that's the place. Mailed out and called a lot of shops and told them what we're doing. All the big manufacturers, look, we're doing a speed run. You guys want to enter?
I'm Guy Grundy. Lived in Huntington Beach, California, pretty much all my life.
Grundy grew up on the beach and by 1968 was a national surfing champion. When Infinity Surf Shop received word from O'Mahony about the speed run, Grundy was immediately chosen to compete.
When I was skating on the driveways, that's when I kind of developed my side-by-side foot stance.
Also getting wind of the run, skateboarding's famous Hitchcock brothers. Skitch and his brother Garrison, a speed demon, known for bombing hills without helmet or shoes. The brothers came up with an unusual approach, the Stinger Bullet, a custom hybrid skateboard with a fiberglass nosepiece and a lowered center of gravity.
Pretty frightening to look at that hill for the very first time and go, somebody's going to launch off that hill.
It was a drag race. You take off at the top so you can get to the bottom the fastest.
It's like Acapulco cliff diving. You don't get practice. You know, once you launch off, you're there.
The historical ramifications were clear. Covering the event, an ABC television crew and the Guinness Book of World Records, ready to crown the winner/survivor and give them bragging rights of being the world's fastest skateboarder. And in a testament to the fear-inducing grade, several racers turned up and backed out.
There was at least 4 people that came up to me when I was at the top of the hill and said, "You're crazy. I wouldn't ride down this hill. This is dangerous." But in the end, there was only 2 of us that actually went down the hill.
So, it was the minimum amount of competitors to have an actual race, one being Guy Grundy.
And he was real pro, and he had his leathers, and I mean, the guy was focused.
His competition, Garrison Hitchcock and the Stinger Bullet.
As soon as we got there, we saw the first run, and it was a great hill.
He fell on his 3rd time trying to get down from half the hill. And they wheeled him away in an ambulance, and he had broken his wrist, and I think he sprained his ankle real bad.
Hitchcock was the hill's first, but not last, casualty. And his injury left one competitor, Guy Grundy. Could he conquer the imposing steepness?
You had to put your balls on the line. I mean, it's downhill.
I took it from the very top. I didn't hold back at all. Took it from the very top and went flying down the hill.
You know, he's like a hood ornament on a car. He had the perfect aerodynamic line.
His first year, they clocked me at 50.2 miles an hour. That was the first world record. When I came and finished my first run and got in O'Mahony's El Camino and then started going up the hill and hearing the applause, it was, kind of overwhelming.
So as the 1975 speed run came to an end, a question had been answered. Could a man skateboard from the top to the bottom of Signal Hill?
I can't say I'm a real spiritual man. I think it's just a thing of concentration and really, really being in that moment. I had never gone 50 miles an hour on a skateboard until that day, but I did.
And Like early mountain climbers who risked it all to conquer Everest, accolades came fast and furious for the man of the hour, Guy Grundy. After appearing on the Guinness Book of World Records on national television, hero worship went so far as a Grundy appearance on a lunchbox, and magazine articles alerted downhillers, both polished and raw, to the dangerous contest. You want the title? You know where to go. Signal Hill, California. Skateboarding was growing every day.
Jim Mahoney had a contest every weekend, so we had a contest every week.
I'd like to welcome you this morning to the second annual San Buenaventura Skateboard Championships.
That's the second time.
O'Mahony's Ventura contest even included a new impromptu twist to the sport.
We found a little dirt track, and we just started riding it off to the side, and everyone from the contest was like lining our little track. Everyone was trying to do it, and skateboards were flying everywhere.
But like most other contests, the highlight was the downhill segment. And while it was a thrilling spectacle with many skilled skaters, it's probably best remembered for requiring a very unique stopping technique.
Yeah, I remember that stupid mattress at the bottom of the hill. I rolled onto it a few times.
After doing 30, 40 miles an hour halfway down this hill, how were you going to stop?
You know, you get caught by a grown-up doing that, man, you're in trouble. But here it was, like, endorsed. Fly into a mattress. Go for it.
The growing skateboard circuit attracted many top athletes, like hang glider Tina Trefethen.
And she was something. And so she continued on and shortly became the women's world hang gliding champion.
One needn't look far to see Tina's influences. Her mother Joanne was a world-class racing pilot. So it was natural, after surfing as a young girl and working at the Skateboard Handbook, that Tina, equal parts athlete, risk-taker, and timeless beauty, would pick up skateboarding.
Besides being pretty, she was just fun and just a neat gal.
The allure of the 1976 speed run reached beyond the core group of California stand-up skateboarders. Among those considered to be an outsider, the intimidating longshoreman, Sam Puccio.
The Long Beach Independent came to my house and wanted to do an interview. Like, she says, well, you don't look like a skateboarder. I said, well, skateboarding is not the little blonde-haired sissy sport everybody thinks it is, you know.
I remember him in the garage just putting nails through some 2x4s thinking, come on, that he would never win on that.
It wasn't too difficult to see where Puccio found the inspiration for his creation.
And the luge thing came with just watching the Olympics on television. The luge is always fast. And I hooked up with a couple of partners of mine, and we called ourselves Three Dagos Engineering.
And he practiced on a street, started at the top of the hill, and he did this like at 10 o'clock at night. And he was literally dodging in and out of cars. I remember thinking, I'm going to be a widow.
I was so wrapped up into it that I just kind of ignored the fact that it was my wedding anniversary. And then my daughter was baptized on that day, and so I passed that up too.
He said, I'm going to do this, and sorry I'm missing Kara's baptism, but I'm going to do this, and I'm going to bring home the money.
And it's just a perfectly shaped hill that they happen to have a street that went straight down the steep part.
When you looked at the hill, it was like looking at Mount Everest. And that's how scary it was.
It just had that mystique of that had to be ridden by a skateboard. It couldn't have been for anything else.
It was just you and your board in the hill, and that was magical in a way, you know.
Among those looking to compete in the 1976 speed run, Dave Dilberg.
First of all, I signed up in the Marine Corps in '66. I was 17 years old. When I got sent to Vietnam, I got sent to the worst place you could ever possibly imagine. And we were getting our ass kicked really bad. During my tour of Vietnam, I got blown up 3 times. And it didn't make sense why I was still alive. And after that, nothing mattered to me. If I hit the pier, it didn't matter. It was like nothing. It's not red hot, jagged shrapnel flying through the air. To everybody else, it looked deadly. But to me, it was like nothing.
Also planning to enter the 1976 speed run, Dilberg's friend, downhill ace Chewy Madrigal.
I was born in a small little state on the Pacific coast of Mexico. It's called Colima, and I moved up to the United States.
The Vietnam vet and the immigrant found they had something in common.
He came to me and said, Dilberg, I know where we can go 70 miles an hour on skateboards. And I went, no way. I looked at the speedometer and it said 70 miles an hour. Can't turn enough, so he goes straight and he hits the curb, does about 6 flips, and he breaks his arm. Took him over to the hospital and he put a cast on his arm. Couldn't wear his leathers because the cast was too thick. So he came over to me and he asked me if I could make a fiberglass cast.
And I'm an artist, so I drew the pictures.
Then I took the pieces and we taped it together, put it on his arm, and then we put these big gloves on so you couldn't tell that he had it on.
It was like first fiberglass cast. We didn't patent it. We could have made a lot of money.
Also preparing for the 1976 speed run, a skater who simply went by one name, Waldo. Like the others, Waldo was looking for a way to achieve maximum velocity.
I've designed these wheels that were aluminum hubbed, and then I had the idea to make these things industrial urethane, and only this much urethane touching the ground for least resistance. These wheels at night, the urethane was like glass so hard that when you went down the hill, there was no resistance whatsoever.
Unlike the first, more impromptu event, the second annual Signal Hill Speed Run featured 23 competitors and lured a few thousand spectators.
I can remember we got in the car and we drove all night to make sure we got there in time for Signal Hill. I was surprised at the people that were there. I mean, it was crowded.
It was a good time. Yeah, it was pretty carefree and just enjoying the guys that were just going for it.
There was an enigma about Signal Hill. It was this dark, scary hill, oil pumps. It was hairball.
It was more of a party. I mean, people had kegs of beer and everything else.
Despite the good times, there were two things that hinted this might not be your traditional contest. For one, it was hot, with no shade to be found anywhere near the dusty incline. And two, not everyone's skateboard looked the same.
We were riding in the back of I think it was Jim O'Mahony's El Camino, and those guys looked at my skateboard and they kind of snickered. I straight out told them, you laugh now, but you're gonna be crying later.
And before long, the message was clear. To win this one would require beating out many skilled competitors. The intense heat began to wreak havoc, starting with Waldo Autry and his custom wheels.
They were absolutely as perfect as you could have a wheel to go fast. The race would have been at night on cold asphalt. These wheels are cutting into the road. The very first run I went, whoa, I just about fell over the front of the skateboard because all of a sudden I was going 48 miles per hour instead of 60. Asphalt is hot. My day was done, pretty much.
And Waldo was also one of the hill's first victims of partying just a little too much.
All of my friends would stop me at each and every car and say, here, drink this, this'll help. Next car, here, smoke this, this'll help. All the way up the hill.
Also affected by the heat were the skateboarders who had custom equipment made by racing guru Dave Dilberg.
I didn't realize that the hill was aimed at the rising sun. So when we went down the hill, it was like 300 degrees on the surface of the road. So it like melted the bushings.
First up with Dilberg's equipment was one of the favorites, defending champion Guy Grundy.
His board goes flying into the crowd.
Like I said, it's got to go somewhere.
Probably the worst was our board went into the crowd and took out a few people and broke a kid's leg. It was nuts, man.
Next was Chewy Madrigal, racing despite a broken arm held in place by Dave Dilberg's experimental fiberglass cast.
That year, I fell and I slammed my arm against the concrete and it was nothing. It was perfect. It was like an airbag for guys to jump from high up, you know, it was great.
When Guy fell and then Chewy fell, it was my turn to go, and consequently I fell also.
And in an amazing display of dexterity, Dilberg grabbed his board as he fell, saving the crowd from his skateboard and potential broken bones. Despite the danger, the 1976 speed run still featured a circus-type atmosphere typical of Mahoney events.
I just heard the crowd go wild, and I looked up, and here comes the guy on the big wheel.
Yeah, some nut went down in a big wheel.
Short pants, no shirt, no shoes, no helmet.
I vaguely remember the big wheel.
Amazed, just totally amazed that he wasn't scraped off the street.
Far out, man.
But back to the scheduled event. What would happen when dock worker Sam Puccio attacked the steep incline with his luge-inspired invention?
My advantage was I had this right here, so I could just keep going as fast as you wanted to, get in it.
All I could think about was, dude, don't hit anything, because that's going to kill your family life.
You kind of hear the wind going by your ears. You can hear your wheels just winding so tight, you think like you're just going to spin off.
Sam Puccio's record-setting run at 54 miles an hour shocked the skateboard world.
If anybody says, who did you ever see that did the first luge, it's going to have to be Sam.
Not everyone was happy to see Puccio's unconventional style take the lead.
To me, skateboarding was standing up.
But the big longshoreman wasn't the only one to forego the upright position, as other skaters showed the split that was occurring in the sport.
Well, I saw in the rule book there was nothing that said you must stand up.
We were mad because they threw the event and they included all these coffin racers.
Some in the crowd were also not impressed, yelling, "Stand up!" But the prone skaters also boasted the fastest times. Puccio stood in first place, with a runoff between Tommy Ryan and John Hughes to decide second.
Sam Puccio was standing with me and said, "I'm gonna be your push man," which, to be totally honest, scared the hell out of me.
And as the race came to a close, Sam Puccio won the speed run at 54 miles an hour, followed by John Hughes, who reached 54 in the runoff versus Tommy Ryan. Dave Dilberg was the fastest stand-up skater at 51 miles an hour, but as the contest rules stated, only the fastest racer received the $1,000 first prize, regardless of style.
We kind of hated and loved Sam at the same time.
He went in there with a lot of confidence, and I think gravity probably helped him as well.
It's a good thing I won. It was like, brought home $1,000 going, yeah, look at here, I told you. Yeah, it was kind of cool.
There was a prize for Signal Hill? I didn't remember that. That was kind of, you survived it, that was a prize.
And what about skipping both his daughter's baptism and his wedding anniversary?
Pretty much all was forgiven, yeah.
Four-time breakdancing world champions, the Flying Steps. First, they broke the mold. Now, they want to break America.
Everybody ready? Let's!
Follow the Steps. Now available on Red Bull TV.
The roots of skateboarding can be traced back to surfing. The ancient Hawaiians saw it more as a part of their religion or culture than sport. The Signal Hill skaters definitely agreed.
Skateboarding for me has always been kind of a tangential evolvement from surfing.
We definitely were pretending to be surfers on our skateboards because we couldn't make it to the beach all the time.
The same feeling, the same everything.
Only in the high-risk sports, like downhill skateboarding and big wave surfing, can fun be intermingled so closely with fear. In spots like the drop at Signal Hill or big waves of Hawaii's Waimea Bay.
Signal Hill was definitely the Waimea of its time. If you were racing down Signal Hill, you were surfing Waimea.
On a really big wave, like Mavericks or Waimea Bay, you don't want to fall. Same thing going down Signal Hill, you don't want to fall.
In big wave riding, it's survival, and anybody could drown at any given time. You're in the hands of God, and you really are.
And on top of the sport that influenced the Signal Hill competitors was a trailblazing surfer with a radical style.
Hawaiian-born Larry Bertelman is a world-class surfer whose radical and aggressive style knows no limits.
Had a big afro out there, and he would do the Bertelman slide. He would do it on the waves, I think, first, and then he transferred that to the banks at schools and so on.
All I want to do is just make the maneuvers, same thing like surfing.
Before long, skaters everywhere had a new trick, the Burt. After Sam Puccio's upset win, not many racers trained to race using the traditional stand-up style. Among the few, friends Michael Goldman and John Hudson, both racing for Santa Cruz Skateboards. The story had already been heard. Downhill demons discover the speed run and throw their hat in the ring. But to win the suicide drop, you needed an edge, an angle, a completely new approach.
We had read an article in the magazine was talking about ski jumpers and how that's the fastest way for them to get down the hills with their arms back.
How the hut tuck came about was Mike Goldman tipped me off as the guys that did downhill ski jumping had their arms back in order to get the most aerodynamic tuck. I saw that as being a great idea.
So friends Mike Goldman and John Hudson honed their secret weapon, a technique lifted directly from ski jumpers and inserted into the world of downhill skateboarding.
On a Saturday night, we'd have dinner and maybe have a beer, and then we would take off and we would just skate all over Santa Cruz. And then we'd come back home and we'd watch Saturday Night Live. That was our big training night.
Racer Michael McCreary took a different route, turning to science for a competitive advantage. The first variable, highly secretive tunnel wheels, with a unique formulation similar to that used by McCreary's team.
That year we used a larger wheel than anybody else.
Variable 2. Surfer McCreary gathered fishing weights from local vessels and attached them to a skateboard for increased mass and speed down the infamous incline. There were several approaches to Newton's law of gravity. Terry Nails went a completely different direction.
So I have to remember all this stuff. Terry Nails. Where am I from? LA, San Francisco, Las Vegas.
Nails came from a family with a music pedigree. His father played with many stars.
I kept leaving home. I was like 11, 12 years old, you know. So I ended up in San Francisco, and it was a lot of hills. I surfed a bit. It was a lot colder. And I ended up living with the Grateful Dead for a while. I worked for Big Brother and the holding company. I was probably the first skateboarding drug dealer in Haight-Ashbury.
Can you tell us a little bit about Terry Nails? What was he like as a person?
Crazy.
But the history of Signal Hill was altered when Terry met some Harley-Davidson mechanics by the names of Fausto Vitello and Eric Swenson.
Well, hanging out with those guys originally was sort of like walking into like a cross between like some like punk street gang and a Hells Angels clubhouse.
Fundamentally, if you look at them, they're like hot rodders and bikers or something. They had nothing to do really with skateboarding.
At the time, their main achievement in skateboarding was the over-engineered, lightly regarded stroker trucks. The next step this trio took is almost beyond belief. With inspiration from a variety of sources, they invented a new vehicle created entirely for the speed run. The sources were diverse, yet focused on the same goal: travel through time and space with maximum velocity. These included the skate carts of the 1940s and the Ark, a submersible surf vehicle created in 1973 by Lenny Gambo and Alfred Maldonado, Dave Dilberg's La Bamba, an egg-like airfoil tested on the hills of La Costa. The result, a fully enclosed vehicle, lean-steered, featuring skateboard trucks and wheels, the skate car.
It was the real deal. If you could have actually gotten an engine in that thing, that would have been a Bonneville vehicle.
There wasn't much of a question who would squeeze into the stroker car's claustrophobic cockpit.
You could just have them be standing there, and they said, "You're small, you'll fit."
It was like, realistically, it was like a jockey, right? How much did you weigh then? 100?
Somewhere between 128 and 132 pounds.
See? Yeah, I mean, the weight of my thigh.
As groundbreaking and advanced as the stroker car was, it did have an Achilles heel. The braking system was rudimentary at best, with a lever that tugged at an old tire scrap that was jammed down to the asphalt at high speed, resulting in a modest amount of friction. Very modest.
We almost put a parachute, and I wish we had it, but we kind of thought, nah, we're not going to go very fast anyway.
I really don't want to fall. Whatever I do, it's asphalt, it's gonna hurt.
You know, it's like a car crash, or, you usually lose your mind for a minute. Well, I think that's what going down Signal Hill was, is you lose your mind for a minute.
I had watched too many friends splatter themselves down Signal Hill and lose blood and skin on that hill. It was a dangerous run.
There were enough of us knuckleheads who would risk our life or being paralyzed for $1,000 in prize money, winner take all.
It looked like you were on a roller coaster going straight down to hell.
For 2 years, the death-defying Signal Hill speed run was in solidly male territory, with no women to be seen, except those who kissed the winners at the finish line. But in 1977, the gender barrier was broken by Tunnel's Leslie Jo Ritzma.
When I'd asked them how many women were in the race, they said that there weren't any women. It was too dangerous, so they didn't allow women to be in the race. Eventually, I took some further action. I got a hold of an organization called the Women's Equal Action League in Washington, D.C., and they wrote a letter to the Skateboard Association and asked them to allow me to race.
Also among the first, Michelle Spooky McNeil.
I roller skated like any kid around the neighborhood, and I met some surfer dudes, and they had skateboards, and I thought, oh, that looks really interesting.
Spooky's family was very supportive of her quest for the title.
It was designed by my dad, and he had people that worked for him at his machine shop. He just goes, hey, my daughter's doing this thing. You're going to make this for me. We went the day before, and I started like halfway. We did that about 3 runs like that. And my dad and my brother got tired of carrying it back up the hill. So they said, okay, well, you'll do fine tomorrow.
Competitors turned up early for the 3rd annual Signal Hill Speed Run, but then the unthinkable in drought-stricken Southern California.
After they called us up there, it started drizzling and then maybe into some rain later on through the day.
While the racers waited for the official word, something happened that changed the course of the speed run.
There were a lot of stuff that had fairing, lay-down things and stuff like that, but we really showed up with the only skate car there.
They did cancel the race, which was probably the more intelligent thing to do, because I think if they would have raced us in the rain, I think there would have been a lot of tragedy.
The speed run was delayed, with many heading straight for machine shops, trying to create their own version of the world's newest vehicle, the skate car. The streamlined skateboard mutation even attracted the interest of one of the sport's superstars, slalom king Henry Hester.
I never really thought I was going to get in it and go down the hill. That would have been nuts.
Hester was asked to join the stroker team, which now boasted a true odd couple, blonde surfer Henry Hester and rocker Terry Nails.
Straight up and straight down. What could go wrong?
Despite the wipeouts, the event continued, and in a shocking development, the speed run was altered forever when the crowd witnessed a quantum shift with the arrival of the new vehicle, the skate car. The time had finally come for the highly engineered stroker car, the aluminum speed dart piloted by rocker Terry Nails.
I was watching these things prior to that and stuff, and I was just going like, in my mind, I'm going, something like bad's gonna happen. Things were, kind of out of control. There's a certain sense of Paris in the guillotine days. You know what I mean? The crowd really wanted to see blood.
Once I got in there, I couldn't get out of it because the whole windshield was the way that you got in. So they took the windshield off, fastened you in, and I was dying because there's no air in it. They gave me the push, but I was glad to be moving because at least some air was coming into the car.
He comes flying down the hill, goes blazing through the first intersection, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if he's got a parachute.
I just hit the brakes. All that dust came up, static electricity, whatever it is, and just magnetized right to the inside of the thing. I couldn't see anything.
You could sort of sense this thing wasn't going to stop.
We tried to stop the car.
Yeah.
That was a joke.
Wasn't going to be a happy ending to this moment.
It was like trying to stop a needle. It's like an inch off the ground. It's pointed. I mean, you could throw your body in front of it and you'd probably get stabbed, but I don't know if you'd stop the car.
I hit the brakes, and they just, nothing. And I just pulled the, Harley Davidson mechanical brake setup on it, and I hit it, and hit it, and hit it. And I finally grabbed it, and the whole thing just went, whoop. There wasn't a lot of thought process there, except
Seemed like the closer he got, the faster it went until it became obvious that we weren't going to be able to stop it.
I think the first inkling anybody had of that the hay bales weren't going to work was when I went through them. It was just, oh boy. And you could see the brick building I was headed for, because I knew I was going to hit a wall going 60 miles an hour or I was going to get run over by a car. And there wasn't any two ways about it. There was no way to get out of it.
He just blasts through the hay bale and immediately into the intersection, and all of a sudden you see this car go across.
The impact catapulted the coffin-like stroker car across the busy street where it wedged under a passing pickup truck.
And realistically, when he got hit, like I thought he was definitely dead.
My elbow was knocked into my ribs and cracked my ribs, fractured my ribs, and tore up my leg pretty good. Not a good scene.
I think we had 2 hay bales and a net, and he still made it through, and then got ran over a little bit. So it's not funny, but that's just what happened.
A couple of guys grabbed it and pulled it out from under the truck, and I was like going, I was like a fish out of water, flopping around, flipped out. I remember being in the ambulance and talking to the lady, them taking me to the hospital.
And he manned it up and came back and wanted to run again. That's the good old days.
By that time I got there, I was drinking Jack Daniels for the pain, and they wouldn't let me run.
The difference between him living or dying is probably an inch, or a millisecond.
This car was like a haunted car almost.
Well, it wasn't haunted. We were just morons,
When Spooky got into position in her skate car, the other competitors realized history was about to be made.
Are you kidding? Girls on skateboards? That was cool.
But it's weird, she was actually riding a huge, storybook shoe. All it's missing is the laces.
And then all of a sudden, it was like, go. And they were pushing me, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'm ready. And then I started down. I was holding on to the bar, and it kind of started to rock, so I was trying to straighten it. And when I straightened it, one of the wires snapped.
I remember that people were talking about her neck, that she had rolled over on, on her head, and that was pretty concerning.
I remember word coming up that there was a bad crash. It was unnerving.
I I feel like I've done, some extreme things, but I feel like there's, a little leprechaun on my shoulder.
After Spooky and her leprechaun required a big dose of luck just to survive, Leslie Jo Ritzma risked it all to try to become the first woman to make it from top to bottom.
I was going to make one run down Signal Hill if it killed me. I was scared to death. All I could think of was just concentrating on sticking in one spot. And it's unbelievable how fast it feels like you're going when your head is that close to the pavement. I don't think I was screaming. I'm not a screamer. Well,
The crowd loved the excitement and danger of the skate cars, but they couldn't deny the pure skill and courage of the vertical skateboarders.
People were on both sides of the argument. Some people wanted to lay down, some people wanted to stand up. I was a stand-up guy.
No, I was a stand-up guy. Yeah, skate cars scared me.
Pop quiz, question 1. What would happen when Tunnel's Mike McCreary dropped over the edge with his top-secret wrapped wheels and 10 pounds of fishing weights attached to the bottom of his board?
If you fell off that thing and it took off, that'd be a missile. That would definitely be a missile.
Pop quiz, question 2. Would Michael Goldman and John Hudson's ski jump-inspired aerodynamic hut tuck prove to be a more valuable way to burn to the bottom?
It's a really satisfying feeling to hear the crowd response as I went over the crest of the hill when you can't see the bottom of it.
In '77, when Mike Goldman came down the hill, you knew the sport changed. It was faster. It really looked treacherous.
You'd hit that main drop and it'd be like, there's 10,000 people. You'd hear them screaming and you're just like, wow, there's my wife. Oh. And then you're done.
Answer key. Michael Goldman and his hut tuck won the stand-up at 50 miles an hour, which wasn't a surprise, but how he did it was.
Yeah, I think I took a hit of acid before I went down the hill, so that was interesting. I don't know if I want that to go out.
Despite the horrific crashes, there were some very well-built skate cars and talented riders. The battle for first eventually became clear. Signal Hill guru Dave Dilberg and his Tri-Wave car versus Slalom King Henry Hester and the White Lightning.
So you get to the top of Signal Hill and you cannot see the bottom. It's just a sea of Long Beach. The skate car doesn't have any wind sensation. All you're hearing is the rattling of the metal and fiberglass and stuff.
To go down Signal Hill, you gotta have a lot of guts. You gotta be courageous and have a lot of fear of God. It didn't really matter to me to win. I just wanted to go fast. It's like flying.
These two evenly matched racers achieved the exact same velocity, tying at the record-breaking clip of 57 miles an hour, entering the rarefied world of Guinness stardom and splitting the $1,000 first prize. And in 1977, like other years, the skateboard industry used the Signal Hill speed run as a way to showcase their latest wheels, trucks, and boards.
I go way back with Tracker. They were the first wide skateboard truck built for skateboarding.
Tunnel Rocks, when they came out, and for some time to come too, they were the best wheel on the market, without a doubt.
For years, kids saved up pennies to buy baseball cards with their favorite heroes. But with the advent of the Signal Hill speed run, there was a new sport, new angles, new idols. Skateboard cards. And, just like baseball cards, you got a special bonus: stickers. With the growing popularity of speed runs, more and more skateboard companies wanted to become involved. Among those, California Freeformer, purported to be the largest skateboard manufacturer in the world.
Were they good skateboards?
No, they were terrible.
Despite less than premium product, California Freeformer had put together a formidable team, including best friends Mark Bowden and Mr. Incredible, Ty Page.
Freestyle, slalom, speed. You know, back in those days, if you weren't good at everything, you weren't that good.
Freeformer was headed by savvy businessman Rick Smith.
So Rick saw an opportunity to expand his wings. That's our boss for Freeformer. This was something that he could show off Freeformer, so he made these beautiful cars.
We were fired up. We were excited.
So just a few short months after jumping into the downhill skateboard world, Freeformer and Jim O'Mahony put on the World Skateboard Championships in July 1977. The location? Derby Downs, Ohio. The goal? Spread the danger, excitement, and thrills of downhill skateboarding to the nation's heartland. The gamble was clear. Would the average American take to California's new sport? The answer came soon enough.
This is an entirely different theory for just about anybody. These are those skate cars.
With the crowd listed at over 13,000 and millions more watching on CBS Sports Spectacular, there was a resounding roar of approval heard around the world. As the interest in downhill exploded, so did Freeformer's desire to show its presence on the podium. So much so, they recruited popular hang glider / skateboarder Tina Trefethen.
This was a cute little girl that was on the team that could do anything, and how talented she was and how coordinated she was, and she was a daredevil.
She was really pretty, and I kind of had a little crush on her back then, and I think a lot of guys did.
I wasn't worried about her skateboarding or flying. She was good, but about the skate car, I didn't know anything about them.
The Freeformer cars had pretty paint jobs, but the team members had difficulties piloting the bullet-shaped vehicles.
First, I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I realized by getting to know Rick, he was a very controlling person, he was very strong-willed, and he ran a very tight ship, and it wasn't a democracy.
The skate cars, we didn't get to practice much, so ride them and do good, and we did what we were told. Yep, it's like a rolling casket.
Kann nie so wie im Wettkampf klettern, einfach am Gyrotore klettern.
You better know yourself, or you're gonna die.
Das war der Punkt, wo von mir aus ein Sportkletterer Alpinist geworden ist.
Cherotara, now available on Red Bull TV.
It was crazy how fast it ramped up into just a major, major event.
Everybody was, at the end of the day, shaking hands and, congratulating each other. Just the fact that you pulled it off and made it down the hill.
You know, you win Signal Hill, you'll talk about that the rest of your life, and it'll be in the books.
We didn't compete against each other. We compete against the hill.
They're all great, but Signal Hill obviously was the prize that everybody remembers. You know, that's where you set a world record. That's where everybody showed up.
Those that can race Signal Hill and make it to the bottom of the hill successfully, those are the winners. And I'll even take it even a step further. Those who are willing to stand on top of the hill and just push over the edge. If you're willing to do that, you're one step ahead of the rest of the crowd.
When California surfer Roger Williams was sent to Vietnam and chosen to drive a gun truck, he entered a new paradigm. It was a hectic landscape with friends and foes around each corner, and Williams took the wheel with a steely confidence.
Came home just pretty wired, a lot of adrenaline. I kind of used this scenario. My friends would move at a snail's pace, and I was like a hummingbird around them.
Would Roger Williams be able to transfer his driving skills from the hills of enemy territory in Vietnam to the drop at Signal Hill, skate car style?
What took four, main people, Tom Dennis, myself, and John helped.
And we started out basically like an ironing board design, and we would use that as our means for developing our braking system, because they had to have one mechanical brake and then one parachute.
I was one of the pushers. At high school track, I was 16 years old, a lot thinner than I am now. We paced it off like we were getting ready for a long jump or something, just how many steps it would take to get going to full speed, and then practice the timing of getting that press off the chest.
just hoping they didn't crash or that Dennis wouldn't run over Roger, following behind him, trying to track his speed.
I just wanted to go out there and do the best we can and, possibly win this race and then just get out of town.
As the skate car racers fabricated their sleek, gravity-powered machines, more and more turned to the experts from the competitive world of motorsports.
I came down and watched the 77 event, especially after watching Henry's car and how true it ran. I said, I want to do this.
So Jack Smith sent a letter to Craig Vetter, a designer of aerodynamic motorcycle fairings.
And a couple weeks later, I received a letter from him saying, sounds like something we'd be interested in.
The result? The Vetter Streamliner. Not everyone focused their energy on aerodynamic skate cars, and no team cared more about the standing skateboard world than Rich Novak and Santa Cruz Skateboards.
We just decided that we were going to win everything. And so we went out and got the best athletes we could.
True to his word, Novak and Santa Cruz put together one of the strongest stand-up downhill skateboard teams ever.
And I met some skateboarders in Berkeley. They took me to Tunnel Road, and that was it. I was hooked. I raced on Tunnel every day, and I really did hone my skills and became pretty darn good at downhill.
We were basically snow skiers, and they had a drought that year, so we started going to El Dorado Hills and setting up cones like slalom snow skiing and racing around them.
And it was fun putting it together because we got to get screwed up every night.
June 11, 1978, the 4th annual Signal Hill Speed Run. Many competitors had signed up despite the requirement of a release form that warned of possible injury or the ultimate sacrifice for the sport of skateboarding, death.
When you watch the footage and you see the amount of people that are coming out of the crowd when somebody crashes or something, and you go, my God, it looks like a rock concert. It looks like Woodstock.
And in an act of validation of the importance of the contest, champion surfer Larry Bertelman took a break from beautiful women and picturesque beaches to visit the Dusty Drop.
Because you fall, you get hurt. There's no water down there, man.
He went down and his board went into the crowd, and I understand a gal broke her ankle, or maybe 2 gals did.
There were more hapless fellows to follow. Next was Herb Spitzer, wipeout victim of 1977, whose sole goal was making it to the bottom of the monstrous hill.
It's funny, you don't hear much other than the pitch of your bearings when you're racing, but I could hear those guys screaming and yelling my name, cheering me on. And if there was ever a moment in my life where I felt like I won, I was successful at something, felt like I was a part of something, it was that moment in life.
Team Santa Cruz was armed with their training and camaraderie.
It was thrilling. There's 5,000 fans on the side of the course. They're screaming. They want you to sign my shirt, sign my skin, sign my hat, anything.
And we got down there early on a Friday, and we went to the hill. I looked over the side, and it literally scared me to death.
Hudson was just in a class by himself. To me, no one was better than Hudson.
I only beat John once at the Berkeley contest, and his wife was in labor.
And this year, he had a secret weapon, the brand new Indy trucks.
Indy trucks were the trucks I was involved in developing. It started with the stroker truck with Emrico and Fausto and Eric, but the Indy truck came out of that. The fact that I was probably going faster than anybody else because the crowd was roaring. I could hear the crowd roar.
So, like a concert violinist performing a solo to perfection, John Hudson's dominant performance surprised no one at Hill Street. As the modified racers and skate cars gathered at the top, the Hill Street crowd was aware that the bullet-shaped vehicles raised the bar for speed and injury. The female racers now had their own division with trophies, prize money, recognition, and risk. First up, Mickey Horn, and despite a great downhill clip, she was thrown at the bottom of the hill and ejected from her freeformer car, horrifying the crowd.
It was just out of control.
All eyes turned to the world hang gliding champion, Tina Trefethen, a freeformer. Her run was perfect until she hit the bottom of the hill and swerved almost identically to her freeformer teammate, Mickey Horn. But with a combination of nerves and skill, she was able to keep the skate car on Hill Street, averting disaster.
Any woman that went down that hill is, hats off.
As the men got underway, it was clear some had practiced quite a bit for the challenge laid down in front of them.
Pull the front of the board up and stop very abruptly. And everybody thought that was great. It was a huge applause.
When the skate cars started running in 1978, they were clearly faster than the year before.
I was very nervous about the final drop because you kind of roll into it on a couple little hills and then you take the big drop. And I know once you went over the crest, that was it.
Relatively unknown and considered a long shot, Roger Williams and his Silver Street crew were confident despite their dark horse status. So, after a year filled with preparation, practice, and more practice, the Vietnam gun truck driver took the drop.
Everything was blurry. It was tough to see, stuff going by me.
I believe one run they even actually wanted to gain speed by driving on top of the painted stripes for a portion and then coming back. And then the chute would come out. It was just real slick.
The competitors quickly learned they had to add the timing tape to the list of obstacles at the bottom of the hill.
So they put strips across the roadway.
And when my son crashed, it looked horrible.
Powerflex's Nick Leonard didn't fare much better. The parachute didn't open, and a race official jumped in front of Leonard to try to help stop him. The experienced Leonard knew the danger to both the official and himself. So he steered around the official and put the Powerflex car into a spin.
And what he did is he hit the curb head first. And it basically, the bulkhead that's in front of his face where the skateboard truck was, it peeled his nose and cheek all the way back. Blood all over the car. And
a trip to the hospital and 40 stitches later, Nick Leonard was happy just to have survived the death drop. As the contest and the carnage continued, the message became clear. Piloting an enclosed skate car over 50 miles an hour without a steering wheel down a road that resembled a cheese grater was no simple task.
There were guys going down, there was skin on the pavement.
yeah, it was huge. Bodies were flying everywhere. It was gnarly.
Skate cars were like going over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
It was a lot of chaos. You heard sirens, you heard people screaming, but if you were up high, you didn't necessarily see what was going down below.
And in what can only be termed as a promoter's worst nightmare, the race was held up several times since there were not enough ambulances.
Wow, this is a really messed up race, you know. You have to hold on, we don't have enough ambulances in the city.
But the risks probably only encouraged freeformers Ty Page.
And then it was all about screaming like an Indian, you know, like to your death. Yeah! And hopefully you made it, and I did.
Next up, Ty Page's teammate, Mark Bowden.
Mark comes down, I'm watching him, you know, and he doesn't pull a chute before that jump. He hits the jump, as soon as he lands, he pulls his chute. The chute gets caught by the air and turns him like this. He's doing a slide right into the curb.
I just put my head down and just go, you know, here it comes, bam. Yeah, hit a curb, flew over, wrapped around a telephone pole. I just started screaming, yeah.
I go, what's the matter, Bowden? He goes, I'm alive, I'm alive. I go, dude, you're crazy.
And they took him off in an ambulance, and that was, my adrenaline was pumping pretty hard on that one.
I knew I could have been killed easy. And you're going 60 miles an hour down this rolling casket, this far off the ground.
With Bowden's freeformer skate car in pieces, Tina Trefethen still wanted to go again despite a squirrely first run. Her goal, eclipse female competitor Mickey Horn's 57.52 miles an hour and become the first world champion in both hang gliding and skateboarding.
Because she never crashed. She always did it perfect.
I can start off by saying that's probably the worst day of my life.
Brother Tom spotted what he considered to be an Achilles heel, a primitive braking system.
And these are what I coined the phrase Fred Flintstone brakes. You literally come down with an apparatus that pushes on the ground, causes friction, and slows you down. Part of me says that I should, what do you do? I'm having trouble here saying it, but you should put a stop to this. Hindsight's wonderful, right?
They didn't fasten her down real tight. That might have contained her inside of the freeformer.
So the crowd, having already witnessed several near catastrophes, saw Trefethen's attempt to enter the record books.
And so she came over the hill looking beautiful, right on line, goes past me about 60 and...
The crowd was in awe as Tina rocketed past the finish line.
And she gets to the intersection and she's gone. And I see this hard left turn and it's just, she's gone. She disappears.
She was laying down this high off the ground, face first, into the curb. Boom, like this.
It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. There was no fencing. There were just pedestrians, fans, people, children sitting there in the way of this 150-pound aluminum and fiberglass projectile.
She hit the worst place that you could on the course because it was a steel pole embedded in cement. I mean, she hit it dead on.
And I thought about her, but I also thought about, the people in the crowd who looked like they were just gonna get hauled out, in body bags, not ambulances.
They said it was like an explosion, like a boom.
Trefethen, ejected from her skate car, had landed underneath a pickup truck.
And when they pull her out, she is chest down, but face up, helmet. And I remember just whatever goes through your system, the shock.
The huge crowd was in shock as Tina Trefethen was loaded into the ambulance.
My husband was further down the hill, and he came back up to me, and he says, I don't know if Tina's going to make it. And he says, I saw her getting in the ambulance. He says, this looks really, really bad.
As Tina was being rushed off to the hospital, the race once again went into a holding pattern. Only this time it was more serious, more dire. So much so that skate car racer Eddie Weatherman tried to take matters into his own hands.
He was screaming about not racing, to boycott the race.
He was just going around telling people, this is too dangerous, we gotta shut this thing down.
We were already committed. No one was gonna stop what they were gonna do.
Weatherman's attempt to shut down the race failed. Although nobody knew the fate of racer Tina Trefethen, the speed run was back on. While all of the skaters continued with their quest, Ty Page's mother didn't like the record of the free-former skate cars.
I remember turning around and marching up to Ty and saying, Ty, you're not getting back in that skate car. And he said, oh, mother, rah, rah, rah. And I said, if you try to get into it, I said, I'll stick my foot through the windshield.
I said, Mom, what are you talking about? She goes, Tina just crashed. Tell you the truth, Ty, I'm not sure she's gonna make it.
A frustrated Ty Page still wanted to race.
And he still was saying give me a bad time. And so that's when I went straight up to Rick. And I remember I had a Coke can in my hand, and I crushed it. I said, my son is not getting in that skate car, not now or ever. He looked me straight in the eye, and he says, okay. And I just sort of stood there, and we sort of stared at each other, and that was sort of the end of it.
Ty Page's day was done. But the other racers continued their assault on skateboarding's Everest, with most probably breathing a sigh of relief after surviving the steep incline. So when the end finally came to the 4th annual Signal Hill Speed Run. Over a dozen racers and spectators were at the hospital. But there was still prize money and trophies to be handed out. Basically, recognition for the winners/survivors of this most dangerous skateboard race, a race that slalom champion Bobby Piercy termed suicide. In the stand-up division, favorite John Hudson recorded the fastest time ever down Hill Street, 53.45 miles per hour, with second going to his friend and rival Michael Goldman, and 4 of the top 5 places to the dominant Team Santa Cruz skaters. The skate car race was tight, with Jack Smith third and Henry Hester second. First went to Roger Williams and his Silver Streak, with a speed of 59.92 miles an hour, the fastest time ever recorded for a skate car. But while the stand-up and skate car racers received their accolades, many wanted to know what had happened to Tina Trefethen, who, after gambling on a second run, edged out her competition and won the women's division with a speed of 57.69 miles an hour. A gutsy choice that may have cost her her life.
A circle, never ending, yet it takes you from beginning to end. It's continuous, yet ever-changing. As the world turns, a wheel turns, life begins and ends. An adventure film on the ever-changing status of life in nature, machine, and man. Life Cycles, now available on Red Bull TV.
I call freeformers. I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about your vehicle, and I think I can help. In his words, it was the track and the riders. And besides, we've put a roll bar in, and no one will get hurt again.
So despite the fiasco of the 1978 Signal Hill Speed Run, CBS Sports Spectacular was at the second Derby Downs in Akron, Ohio, July 1978, just a few weeks after Signal Hill. The freeformer event gave downhill skateboarding a gift, a chance to redeem itself. In a safety measure, empty tires were placed on the side of the track.
I said, I don't want to do this. And I went up to Rick and told him, hey, look, I don't want to race this thing. And he says, well, if you don't, I'll find someone else who will.
We're just young guys, you know, and this is the way we're making our living. This is the only way we know how to make a living at the time.
I said, all right, I'll do it.
Mark Bowden is locked in there and being told to try to hit 48.
Racing head-to-head, Mark Bowden against Henry Hester and the White Lightning.
And I didn't realize, you know, they'd changed the bushings. So as I started taking off, I was fighting like this to try to get it to go straight as it was going to the left.
Well, since they were side by side, it looked as though he was going to hit Henry Hester.
And I see him trying to tip his car over, you know, like this. And he's turning, almost hits Henry. Henry just gets by him.
And finally I hit my brakes, and it swerved me into this area where there was no padding or anything, and I buckled like an accordion.
He was screaming in pain. Ah!
And eventually people got there and they took the body off and the screaming continued.
And I went down to see him. Mark didn't even know I was there.
Well, when I crashed, I was in so much pain. A pain I'd never felt. I knew this was bad.
As the race came to an end, the talk was still of the freeformers' skate cars and Bowden's accident.
I mean, they looked great. They had the best paint jobs of anybody. It was that sparkly black, gray, and big lettering on them. But the guts just weren't that good.
But in the design, there was something wrong with them. I think there was something that anybody would have had a bad experience in those cars. Well, that's my opinion. I said to myself, I think this is the end of skate cars. I think this is pretty much it. I think I've just witnessed kind of the end of a sport.
As all the skaters returned back to California, Mark Bowden remained in the Ohio hospital.
I heard he broke his back. He was instantly shorter than me, just like that.
The racers were still in the dark about the fate of women's skate car champion Tina Trefethen.
Technically, they say later, died in the ambulance. The guy didn't say anything to me, but there was no pulse. Somewhere in there, I was just looking into her face, just trying to, get some idea of if we have someone here or not, or what's going on, and she blinked. So, something was alive.
I remember dying in the ambulance. I was drowning. I could feel my chest filling up with fluids. It felt just like you were drowning, in excruciating pain, and there's nothing they can do for you in an ambulance except try and transport you to the hospital. So I remember going, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Apparently, I was told later that I was actually DOA at Long Beach Hospital. I was revived when I got there, had died again, died multiple times, and they used the paddles to revive me. And they knew they were going to have to do a pneumonectomy, remove my lung, which wasn't normally a person on call at Long Beach. And the best lung surgeon on the East Coast was out golfing at a beautiful golf course in Long Beach, and they sent a helicopter, flew him in, and they saved my life. The next real specific memory I have was drawing pictures of a room that I was supposedly never conscious in, and experienced some things that eventually they called a near-death experience. And I made a choice. I wanted to stay alive. No way I thought I'd live to be 23. That's amazing. Just being alive. I'm not doing this very well. Sorry. I get goosebumps. I start over. My most severe injury, besides surviving removing the lung, was that my shoulder blade was in about 14 pieces.
How many ribs did you break?
How many do we have? I'm probably the only one you're going to talk to from Signal Hill that's in some way thought about Signal Hill every day for the last 3 decades.
In 1979, optimistic promoter Jim O'Mahony attempted the impossible to obtain a permit from the city of Signal Hill for a 5th speed run.
Signal Hill, there was the near death and all the legalities, so it just sort of ended the whole movie.
After O'Mahony's request was denied, speedruns came to a virtual standstill. And to make sure there wasn't a repeat of Signal Hill, the city of Los Angeles enacted a law banning skateboarders from going faster than 10 miles an hour, a law skaters referred to as the Roger Hickey Law, named after speedrun racer Hickey.
I've seen skateboarders show a total disregard for the safety of others on the highway.
But skateboarders don't worry about such frivolity. Some Signal Hill competitors and their friends found a winding, dangerous spot in the hills above Los Angeles called Glendora Mountain Road. It featured rough asphalt, a steep grade, and blind corners into oncoming traffic. Basically a dream location for underground races. Such was the state of downhill skateboarding, relegated to a bootleg activity courtesy of Signal Hill's dubious safety record. A couple years after the demise of Signal Hill, skateboarders, eager to replicate their moves in the snow, invented a new sport called snowboarding. April 1981, Colorado hosts the world's first snowboard contest, representing the Signal Hill speedrun, Jack Smith.
Hey, I'm Jack Smith, skate cars, snowboards, it's all downhill. I just wanted to see how mine would go against theirs.
This contest was really good, considering it is the first contest ever.
The small, picturesque town of Santa Cruz was the hometown of 2 Signal Hill champions.
Goldman and John Hudson are living legends.
Growing up, we always heard about John Hudson and how he was the gnarly downhill skateboarder, and everyone has a lot of respect for that,
These big wave surfers have their own challenge to match the steep drop at Hill Street, called Mavericks. It's one of the premier big wave contests of the world, with waves up to 80 feet.
It's some sort of energy that kind of you thrive off of, going that fast.
Being in such a big barrel at Mavericks is pretty nuts.
You're cheating death. There's some kind of rush and all that.
And the current state of downhill skateboarding? It's rebounded to become an international phenomenon with speeds of over 80 miles an hour. And a race circuit spread over several continents. The legacy of Signal Hill permeates into modern skateboarding.
It was the first downhill skateboard race, so everybody, respects it big time.
One of the gnarliest, most hardcore things that you can do on four wheels, you know?
Those guys weren't in it for the money, because there weren't any money. That's sort of inspiring, I think.
I'd thank them and congratulate them for paving the way for everybody that's riding today.
It was the birthplace of numerous facets of skateboarding, including the world's first downhill race, stand-up air braking, street luge, the dominant wind-cutting hut tuck, the introduction of women into the sport. And let's not forget surfing champion Larry Bertelmann's cutbacks and slides. Mix in Signal Hill's Tom Kishen and his sliding gloves of 1976. And let speedrun racer Cliff Coleman combine all of the above into a perfect system of downhill sliding. There are definitely more similarities than differences when it comes to the old versus the new. With all competitors willing to risk life and limb for a chance at the glory. And if you make it to the bottom in one piece and beat out all the other competitors, well, you can bask in the glory. But that's not why skateboarders feel the need to go down a large hill. It's not really about competing or winning or money or fame. Perhaps British mountaineer George Mallory described it best. If you cannot understand that there is something in man which responds to the challenge of this mountain and goes out to meet it, that the struggle is the struggle of life itself, upward and forever upward, then you won't see why we go. What we get from this adventure is sheer joy. And while Signal Hill teased, tempted, and taunted the world's first skateboard racers, one thing is for sure. Nobody who dared drop over the edge of Hill Street's famous precipice was ever the same again.